You gotta be flipping my flapjacks. We have a lot to go through in this video here today. Man, do we have a lot to go over. First thing we're gonna get into in this video here today is a stock I sold all of it. And I'm a little upset. I'm a little in my feelings in regards to the situation. So we'll talk about what's going on there and my feelings in the numbers and all those sorts of things. Okay, then we're going to get into Google's earnings, and we're going to talk about if Google represents a buy. Now, at this point in time, the stock's going down big. It's going down the biggest of any stock I've seen really after hours. So we'll speak about that, go into their numbers and kind of what's going on there. Third thing we're going to talk about is what this means for Meta stock on Thursday. Google being the worst stock pretty much after hours, going down huge. After hours loss is probably, I would say, $50 billion to $100 billion loss after hours. What does this mean for Meta stock on Thursday? Because they're reporting in less than 48 hours from now. So we'll speak about that. Then we'll talk about Microsoft earnings, and we'll also speak about is Microsoft a buy here, given their earnings. So we'll go into that. Talk about Starbucks' numbers and AMD numbers and kind of my feelings on those stocks. And the last thing up here, we'll talk about a stock of mine that is expanding to new states and kind of the opportunity there and some very positive news in regards to that. Okay, two things I need from you before we get into all this. Smash a like, smash a like, smash a like. And also, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're not already subscribed here, make sure that subscription button is on. And that's really it, folks. All right. If you need help understanding valuations, how to value a stock, if you get an undervalued stock or an overvalued stock, if you need help understanding income statements, balance sheets, cash flows, anything like that, check out my private stock group. That's a pinned comment down there. You fill an application and we can see if we can get you in there. You also get access to my 6- and 7-figure Discord chat and all that good stuff. And just this past week, my wife sent out 3 6-figure awards to 3 new private group members that just hit 6 figures in their portfolio. So exciting times. Some folks are hitting some new records here and there, and always good to see. Okay, alrighty guys, so first up here, stock I sold all of, why I'm upset, what's going on there, those sorts of things. Okay, so the stock, what is a stock? It is Skyworks Solutions, and I announced this maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago on the channel, roughly, right? And then I'm on the Twitch live stream here today, and if you were on that Twitch live stream, I do apologize. I did drop some F-bombs in that video, and that's the problem with being live. Sometimes you say some things that, I don't like to do that, but nonetheless, it did happen. So it got a little nasty, it got a little vulgar, and it is what it is, okay? But Skyworks Solutions, their stock spiked. Big after hours, up over 5% after hours. Now, I went ahead and looked at the numbers here, and let's be quite clear about Skyworks Solutions. This was a D grade income statement here, okay? If we look at their net revenues, down to $1.2 billion. At this time last year, they were at about $1.32 billion. Cost of goods sold went up for the company. You never, ever, ever want your revenue to be going down while your cost of goods sold is going up. That means your gross profit or your gross margin is going to get destroyed. And that's exactly what happened to Skyworks Solutions here. Their gross profit fell to $506 million from $637 million in the same quarter last year. Research and development, they dropped out a little bit there, which, you could look at that as a good thing, but I could also look at that as a bad thing. If you drop your R&D spend, guess what? You may not be able to innovate as much for the future, and that could hurt you as a tech company, right? Selling general administrative, they were able to drop that year over year. Total operating expenses fell to $248 million from $270, but still, the gross profit fell so much, so their operating income is $258 million versus $367 at this point last year. So just an epic drop, right? Net income $231 million versus $309 in the same time last year, right? And then EPS $1.45 versus $1.94, and diluted $1.44 versus $1.93. So overall bad. Just a bad earnings report for Skyworks. Now, the stock is dropping a bit more after hours. It's now up, a little less than 3% from the 5% plus move. And that's never a good situation in regards to that. So am I having second thoughts and feelings around Skyworks Solutions? Well, I stand by my decision there, right? As I said before, Skyworks is a good company, got a good management team there, right? I was a pretty happy shareholder over the years I held it. But my opinion is there's just better options out there than Skyworks Solutions. And Skyworks is really very dependent upon the next big hit in the smartphone industry. And the next big hit might be the iPhone 16, because from what I heard, the next iPhone is likely going to be much bigger sizes. And so usually whenever Apple goes to a bigger size, there's usually a big uptick in demand. But that's a year away, right? So for now, Skyworks is just kind of there. But overall, I stand by my opinion as a long-term, somebody that's thinking over the next 3-5 years, okay? So we'll see. I'm still keeping an eye on it, and we'll see where that goes, okay? Next up here, Google earnings. So let's talk about what Google earnings, let's talk about if that stock's a buy, and then we'll get into what it means for Meta on Thursday, okay? So Google's earnings report, don't let the move after hours confuse you, because you see the stock down big after hours, and you're like, oh, it must have been a horrible report from Google, okay? Don't let it fool you. And we'll speak about if this is just a pump fake in regards to Google stock, okay? This is an A- income statement here. Very nice numbers. Revenue came in at over $86 billion. This same quarter last year, they were at $76 billion. Very good. Cost of revenue obviously up, research and development up, sales and marketing was up. That's to be expected. G&A up very slightly, but they didn't have any of those, explosive moves up there. Total costs and expenses were up year over year, but the revenue far outstripped that. So the income from operations went from about $18 billion to over $23.5 billion of operating income here. Okay, look at that net income, well over $20 billion. If you want to round up, $21 billion in net income versus 13.6 in this same quarter last year. Really good numbers. EPS on a basic basis, $1.66 versus $1.06. It's really good, folks. Okay. Really, really good. Now, you want to know how YouTube's doing, okay? You're watching us on YouTube. Well, here's what's going on with YouTube, okay? YouTube was actually up year over year, decent as far as YouTube ads. They did about $9.2 billion versus $7.9 billion in the same quarter last year when it comes to YouTube ads. So that's good to see YouTube kind of starting to move back in the right track as far as YouTube ads go. As far as Google search and other, $48 billion versus $42.6. That's good. That's their core business, obviously, right? Google Network, however, was down a bit for the company. So overall, though, $65.5 billion of Google advertising versus $59 billion in the same quarter last year. That's good. If you look at Google subscriptions, platform, and devices, that had great growth. That was up about $2 billion year over year, so that's phenomenal there. If you look at the other Google Cloud, $9.1 billion versus $7.3 billion, that's good news. Just wait for Amazon, wait for AWS, baby. Ooh, okay. Now, this is big for the company. See this little category no one pays attention to called Other Bets? Look at this. It went from $226 million of revenue in the same time last year to $657 million. That's insane growth, folks. Tell me if my math is incorrect, but I think that's about a 3x. So that is explosive growth for their Other Bets category. So where's that one going? Are we talking about a run rate of $1 billion plus a quarter by this time next year? Then all of a sudden you're talking about a $4 billion run rate business a year, right? And then even if the growth rate slows, they're growing so explosive, the growth there, that's phenomenal. So I think this is one of the little hidden gems in regards to Google McDougal right now, my personal opinion, okay? Now, if we look at operating income for the different segments, look at Google Services, $26.7 billion in operating income versus a little over $20 billion in the same quarter last year. Google Cloud, big. This is big, folks, okay? They're now making a lot of operating income from Google Cloud, okay? $864 million of operating income versus $186 million operating loss in the same time last year. Do the math on that, and that's roughly $1 billion switch in a year, okay? In a year, they flipped it. About $1 billion there, okay? Massive, epic. Now, they did have some one-time, restructurings of their workforce and office space, things like that. And some other changes they made in regards to their lifespan of some chips and stuff like that. Look at the balance sheet, total cash equivalents, and marketable securities, $110 billion. That is down slightly year over year. They were at $113 billion in the same quarter last year. Total assets is now up to $402 billion. That's versus $365 billion in the same quarter last year. So that's incredible. One of the most asset-heavy companies in the world that you don't really usually think of as an asset-heavy company, right? Look at long-term debt. $13.2 billion in long-term debt. It's nothing, literally nothing for Google. That's insane to think that a company like Google McDougal could have only $13.2 billion in long-term debt. Unbelievable. Total stockholder equity up to $283 billion versus $256 billion in the same quarter last year. So very, very good for Google, okay? Now, in terms of their top line, bottom line, which is, what Wall Street looks at a lot of times, they beat them both. They had a top line beat and a bottom line beat in regards to that. So that's good as well. So let's recap this. Great balance sheet, as great as it's ever been, right? Pretty impressive numbers across the board. The other bets category, massive growth there. They've flipped to big profitability in Google Cloud, and I'm sure that's just going to continue to build out over the coming years. I mean, things are looking pretty good here for Google. But you got to ask yourself, is the stock a buy? My opinion of Google stock as a buy or not is this. So here's the deal, okay? The stock's trading about 23 times. I mean, based upon tomorrow, it might be trading about 22 times 2024 numbers, right? Assuming the stock's down 5, 6, 7% tomorrow. So if I had to do kind of a little chart here on if I think the stock is overvalued or undervalued, I'd definitely put it closer to the undervalued side overall. So I like Google here. I like the stock as a buy tomorrow, and I like the stock as a buy probably over the next, 6 to 9 months. They do have a government overhang that will be lasting over the company for the next few years, so that's going to hurt valuation in the short term, so just keep that in mind. But outside of that, I like it. Good numbers all around. I'm very impressed out of Google, McDougal there, okay? And in terms of the stock price, it could just be a pump fake. It could just be a short-term pump fake. And the next thing you know, a few days from now, all of a sudden the stock starts coming back to life. Maybe it's down for the next 24 to 48 hours, and then all of a sudden Meta reports, and then, Amazon reports, and then all of a sudden, things start heading back in the right direction. So could just be a pump fake in regards to Google McDougal, okay? Now, what does this mean for Meta stock on Thursday, which is my biggest position personally in the public account, and not just my biggest position, by far and away my biggest position, right? Stock's been red hot going into these earnings. I would say after seeing the Google numbers, I would say there's probably about a 95% chance that Meta double beats on their earnings. Now, just because you double beat, once again, doesn't mean your stock's flying. Look at Google. I mean, Google double beat and the stock's down 5+%, right? But yeah, I put odds at about a 95%. After seeing the advertising numbers out of Google, I'm expecting Meta to report much more impressive than Google McDougal. And so being that I thought Google's numbers are good, I think Meta's going to come with even better, okay? Now, there's a better setup for Meta now at this point in time, being that, a little concern around the move that's going to happen here in Google stock, and people's, concern about, oh man, the stock's moving down. Maybe that's going to happen to Meta here. So I actually like the setup. That is going to be a little more cautious now. The setup over the next 24 hours is going to be a little more, cautious going into Meta's earnings after the bell on Thursday. And there's also a chance that Meta could be a superhero there, because the one thing people aren't convinced of in terms of Google is they're still not convinced it's actually an AI play. Whereas Meta, I think it's going to become more and more evident that Meta is a direct AI play in terms of on the consumer side, feeding content that's relevant to you on the AI side, and as well as serving up ads using AI. And then on top of that, I think with their AI platform now at this point in time that a lot of developers are using, I think we're off to the races when it comes to. So there's a chance Meta could be a superhero and come in here and just, knock the doors off. So something to just kind of keep in mind there. But that's kind of my 2 cents there, okay? Now keep in mind, if you want to know the company that, you could watch my video from a few days ago. The big tech stock that I think is going to knock the doors off and shock everybody. It's one stock that I think is going to shock the world. And that company reports Thursday after the bell. It's Amazon. I think this is a shocking one. I think this is the one that comes in, knocks the doors off of all their numbers, and people are just sitting there just baffled. Like, oh my gosh, Amazon, the big king, is back. That's my opinion on that. I went in depth on why I think that. But based upon everything I'm kind of seeing here, I think it's setting up for, a pretty shocking earnings report for Amazon. And keep in mind, I will be live on Thursday. I'll probably start that live around probably about noon time, I would say Pacific time, okay? And that will be a long live stream that day. That will probably be a 3 to 4 hour live stream because we got to see all the numbers out of Amazon, Apple, and Meta. And then we're going to listen to potentially the Amazon and Meta conference call on the live as well. But certainly 100% for sure, we're listening to Meta conference call on there as well. So that's going to be like literally probably a 3, if not a 4 hour live stream that particular day. So you better join for that one because there's probably going to be like, I would say, 1,000+ people might be on that Twitch live stream. It's going to be insanity. By the way, somebody gifted 30 subscriptions. 30 subscriptions somebody gifted in today's live stream on Twitch. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. Somebody else had gifted 15, another person gifted 7. There were some huge numbers, but somebody, I think his name was Zach. Zach came in with 30 gifted subscriptions. Never seen anything like it in my life. I was like, what? 30 gifted subscriptions, crazy, okay? Now let's talk about Microsoft and if Microsoft's stock is a buy. And then we'll get into Starbucks, AMD, and a stock of mine that's expanding here, okay? So, Mr. Softy came in with exactly what I expected them to come in with. Good numbers, great numbers. I mean, just as about as consistent of a company as you can possibly imagine out there. Product revenue came in at almost $19 billion versus $16.5 the same quarter last year. Services and other came in at over $43 billion of revenue versus $36 in the same time last year. Total revenue $62 billion versus $52.7 billion. Cost of revenue obviously up year over year, but you know, let's just call it the revenue is far outstripping that, right? Gross margin $42.3 billion versus $35.2 in the same quarter last year. R&D, they increased that year over year, but relatively modestly. Sales and marketing, they increased that year over year, but relatively modest. General administrative, they brought that down. So you're going to tell me this company's revenue was up, you know, over $6 billion, and they brought down their G&A? Like, good for you, Microsoft. Operating income over $27 billion. Net income nearly $22 billion versus $16.4 in the same quarter last year. That's an A grade. You want to see an A grade income statement? There it is. If you want to see an A grade income statement, it's right there for you guys, okay? Absolutely right there. Now, in terms of overall top line, bottom line, they had a nice double beat there. They beat by 16 cents in terms of EPS. They also beat revenue by $890 million. You know, Microsoft's not one of those usually like shocking type of companies that would report something crazy like an Amazon might. But yeah, so is Microsoft stock a buy? Let's talk about that. In my opinion, Microsoft stock, I wouldn't say it's a buy. I also wouldn't say it's not a buy. If I had to do kind of an overvalued or undervalued for the stock, I think it's right in the middle. I think it's valued exactly where it should be. Here's the deal. Their fiscal year ends in a very weird time, June. So anyways, but here's the deal. Trading about 36 times this year's numbers, about 31 times next year's expected numbers. I think that's right where the stock should be trading at, given the growth rates this company's been putting up in a somewhat tough environment, given the growth prospects of Microsoft on the AI side over the coming years. I think the stock's trading right where it should be. And to be honest, look at the move after hours. It tells you that, right? There's basically no move. The numbers came out, the conference call happened, and there's basically no move in the stock, which basically is Wall Street saying it's right where it should be. And that's kind of my opinion here in regards to Mr. Softy. I mean, if the stock was 500 plus today, I might say, you know, I might lean a little bit more toward it's not a buy. If the stock was 300 today, I might lean a little bit more toward it is a buy. Right where it's at, I think is right where it should be, okay? Now, let's get into Starbucks, AMD, and then we'll talk about a stock of mine that is expanding into new states, okay? AMD. A minus income statement for AMD. Pretty good overall. Revenue up year over year, not incredible up, but it was up. Cost of sales was up as well, right? But at the end of the day, gross profit was up to $2.9 billion versus 2.7, right? Gross margin did not increase for the company year over year, so not exciting, but also no one was expecting exciting numbers for this quarter or just for 2023 in general for AMD. The excitement for AMD really has to do for 2024, right? R&D kept that roughly in line year over year. Marketing, general, and administrative was up quite considerably year over year there. Operating income up to $342 million versus $224 million there. Net income up to $667 versus $299. EPS to 41 cents from 18 cents. So I'd give them an A minus there for AMD overall. Now, in terms of their top line, bottom line, the problem with AMD is on a non-GAAP basis, EPS just came in line, right? And then revenue came in roughly in line. They technically beat by $60 million, but when you're doing, you know, multiples of billions of dollars of revenue, $60 million is literally like coming in line. That's nothing, right? So the top line and bottom line was nothing exciting there. And then to add a little bit of scariness to the situation, they talked about their revenues expected to be 5.4 to 5.5, or, you know, $5.4 billion plus or minus 300 million. Now consensus was at, 5.5. So the midpoint for 5.4 is almost $200 million under where analysts are at. So that's not ideal. Sequentially, AMD expects data center segment to revenue to be flat. That's also not great. And so I think a lot of people looked at this quarter from AMD and they're kind of like, we understood that the last quarter probably wasn't going to be that exciting, but we expected the commentary around next quarter to be much more exciting than maybe what it was. And it's just not there for AMD right now. And so if you look at this stock, right, here's the deal. I mean, you know, the stock's climbed so much over the past year. I mean, the stock's up going into, if you look at a 1-year chart of AMD, it's over doubled, well over doubled actually. And the stock's moving down about 5.88% after hours to about 161. And I understand why, because, everybody wants to get the major growth going back again with AMD, but it seems like it's still not here, right? So the thing that's saving the stock is the hope that the growth will start really piling up in the back half of the year in 2024. But I think some investors are getting a little impatient here, and they're kind of looking like, come on, man, like what's going on? So, in terms of AMD, I'm a little divided as well because, seeing the guide was a little disappointing there. You kind of expected to see a little more. And it just seems like NVIDIA is really out in front of these guys, man. I mean, NVIDIA's already been putting up the huge numbers, and AMD still is not getting to the huge numbers. And they're still not getting to it next quarter yet again. So that's where it's like, dang, you got NVIDIA just smashing numbers quarter in and quarter out. You got NVIDIA posting these growth rates that are just astronomical. And they're about to put up another ridiculous quarter in terms of NVIDIA. And then you got AMD here, hardly growing at all. And then you tack on an extremely weak guide there. And it's just kind of like, people are waiting like, well, what's going on here, AMD? There's a lot of talk, but there's not enough in the numbers right now. And so that's kind of the disappointing thing with AMD. Don't count AMD out in regards to this game, but it's disappointing to a lot of folks that it's taking so long, okay? Speaking about stocks that have been counted out, Starbucks, this stock is far lower than it was at this time last year. In terms of Starbucks, it was a decent report, but it wasn't great. I would give it a B overall, about a B grade. Their revenue was up about 9.5% in terms of company-operated stores. Licensed stores up 6.5%. So total net revenue was up 8.2%. Production and distribution costs up 6.1%, so less than revenue. That's good. Store operating expenses up 5.1%, but it's obviously far less than 8.2%. That's good. Where we have a couple troubles here and why this isn't an A grade income statement is other operating expenses up 16.3%. Now, this is a really small number, but still, it's about a double up roughly of net revenue, so you don't like to see that. Then on top of that, G&A was up 11.6%. Once again, a far smaller number than revenue, but still, you don't want to see your G&A growing at a far faster clip as a percentage basis than your revenue, okay? Very important. So that's kind of why I gave this a B grade and not an A grade. Operating income up 18.5% there, and net income up 19%, almost 20%. And then net, as far as EPS went, up about 21.6% there for Starbucks. So I think Starbucks is a decent buy here. I don't think it's the most exciting stock. I don't think it's going to have the biggest gains over the next few years. But that being said, I think it's a fine buy. I think its stock will do fine. I think it could, probably, if I had to guess in the next 3 years, does Starbucks beat the S&P 500 over the next 3 years? Just the next 36 months. Let's not worry about the next 10 years. I would say, I think Starbucks can probably slightly outperform the S&P 500 over the next 3 years. That would be my guess. I think it will outperform the S&P 500. But with that being said, the numbers aren't, they got some little trouble spots there, okay? Now let's go ahead and talk about a stock of mine that is expanding to new states and why this is a pretty exciting opportunity here, okay? So if you didn't know, I own a stock named Cheesecake Factory. Now, Cheesecake Factory owns these other concepts that are just these incredible growth engines, in my opinion, for the next decade for that company overall. And these are these Fox restaurant concepts. And one of their concepts is this one called Culinary Dropout. Now, in terms of the most immediate impact on the business, there's a brand called North Italia. That's the biggest opportunity for Cheesecake Factory over the next few years. But I'm trying to look at and see, what is the next other biggest opportunity? In this Culinary Dropout, I've been insanely impressed with this one. And they are going to open up their first location, Alabama. If you live in Alabama, which is probably only 17 people watching this right now that live in Alabama, but if you do live in Alabama, go to Culinary Dropout when it opens. It's supposed to open, I believe, in March here. Okay, Culinary Dropout will open its first Alabama location in Birmingham, the Summit, on March 20th. Fox Restaurant Concepts, founded by James Beard, nominated restaurateur Sam Fox, announced the restaurant coming back in 2022. Culinary Dropout has locations in Arizona. I've been to the Arizona locations. Phenomenal. Go to the one in North Scottsdale sometime. If you're ever in North Scottsdale, go to the Culinary Dropout in North Scottsdale. I'm telling you, okay, go there. Colorado, they have location in North Carolina now, Texas, and one coming soon in Atlanta. So I'm thinking like this is a huge opportunity, and this might be the next biggest opportunity for the Cheesecake Factory after North Italia, right? North Italia, you know, I would expect to see a ton of locations built North Italia over this next 5 years specific, but a Culinary Dropout I think is coming in right behind it. So yeah, based upon what I saw out there, I think it's going to do really, really well, and it has a chance to be the next big one. Okay, so really excited about cake over the coming years. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard about the Elon Musk situation. I covered that earlier on the channel. I did a little 5-minute video covering my opinion on that whole situation, which was pretty nuts. Okay, appreciate y'all joining me as always. Thanks so much for being here. If you need to take your investing game up to the next level, maybe you're already a stock market expert. Maybe you don't need any help. Or maybe you're in your first few years of investing and you need a lot of help. Well, my private stock group's there to help, okay? We can teach you all about income statements, balance sheets, cash flows, 10Ks, 10Qs, how to value stocks properly, to figure out if you're getting ripped off on a stock, or you're getting a great deal on a stock. You know, the differences can be thousands or tens of thousands of dollars of difference between buying an overvalued stock versus undervalued, okay? Very important stuff. Pin comment down there to apply to join us in there. Much love and have a great day.